Questionable Ethics. Chapter 5. Dead Reckoning. My jungle boots pounded against the tiles of a reinforced concrete floor. Equipment rattled away against my body while industrial sirens filled the stagnant air of a dull warehouse corridor. My breathing was heavy and was fast. It was deafening behind my mask. All the other noises around me seemed to be drowned out by it. My legs ached, my feet hurt, my vision was going blurry from stress and fatigue, but I kept going as I sweated through the pain of needing to stop to catch my breath. I wouldn't stop. I couldn't stop. I needed to escape. I needed to get out of this hellhole. I had already escaped once. I'm not getting trapped here again in my dreams. The demon labyrinth that was Black Mesa had coiled its way around my subconscious and had returned me here, stuffing me back behind its thick, soulless walls of concrete and steel. I didn't belong here anymore, yet here I was. Everything I passed looked like it was on repeat, as if I was running on a three-dimensional treadmill. I kept passing the same rooms over and over again. The ceiling lights kept showing up in the same patterns. The walls next to the rooms weren't changing and kept displaying the same signs and computers. It was all just one long corridor with no end in sight that kept looping back in on itself. So I kept running. I had no other option. It was either keep moving and stay hopeful or stop and die. I stopped dead in my tracks as I felt a chilling change in the atmosphere. My heels dug into the linoleum, grinding my rapid pace to an abrupt halt. Feeling the change around me carefully as I slowly looked around it felt like someone had just repaired an air conditioner or opened a freezer. Gusts of teeth chattering wind came up from behind me and swirled around in the air. I looked off to my right just in time to see the glass on a bulletproof security checkpoint window freeze up, then crack under the cold pressure. The chilled, foggy white film expanded across its surface, turning the glass into a fragile sheet of ice, while the metal border of the window grew icicles. A slow-turning ceiling fan above me was creaking away, trying to circulate the air, now quickly froze to a stop, while the electricity from the lights seemed to flicker a bit before dimming slightly. I could see my breath in front of me as misty clouds puffing through my gas mask, while my lenses fogged up around their edges. My exposed fingers felt frigid as they went numb almost instantaneously, so I gripped my rifle harder to try and circulate blood better. I looked around for the source of the cold, or anything that could justify a sudden change in the environment. It was so sudden, so out of place. It was supernatural. I turned around to find a Marine standing behind me. I gasped politely, while my body jolted in fear. His presence startled me. I hadn't seen him before. Now his physical appearance was extremely distressing. He was gray-scaled, all black and white, like some old-timey photograph. The skin I could see was chalky and white, unnatural like a ghost. He wore a gas mask, but his lenses were tinted black, and I couldn't see his eyes, but I could feel him staring at me. So I stared back. We stood there in the freezing corridor, staring at each other, while the icy, frigid cold began to seep into my body and my very mind. The man looked like he was breathing slowly, and his chest rose and fell, yet I didn't see air come from his mask. I want to engage him, whoever he was, but I felt almost drawn to him for some reason. He had this atmosphere surrounding him. It didn't bode well for me, but it beckoned to me at the same time. Something deep inside me told me he was the source of the cold. Identify yourself. Who are you, and what are you doing here? I barked, raising my rifle to my shoulder, readying myself for whatever this person would throw at me. The figure spoke shortly after. his voice deep and robotic. His mask microphone projector must have been damaged because whatever he said was louder than normal and almost unintelligible. This combined with his appearance made what he said heart-stopping eerie. "You know who I am." His words sounded like they were all around me, but I could clearly tell he was the one speaking. "If I knew who you were, I wouldn't have asked. Now quit bullshitting me. Who are you?" I hollered back at him. "I'm you, Adrian," he said as his head nodded toward me. I growled in anger at his response. "Oh, it's you. Figured you'd try and surface again while I was conscious. Get the hell out of my way. I'm getting out of this dream. And if you so as much get in my way, I swear to God I'll put you down like the vermin you are," I ordered back while taking a step forwards to him to reassert my dominance. Such bravado. Such anger. Such dominance. This is a feeling I'm sure you'll never feel again. So get your money's worth while you're here," the man hissed while he extended his pasty white arms out to his sides. "As much as you hate Black Mesa, this was the only place that made you feel alive, Adrian. Nowhere else gave you this kind of freedom. Even the previous combat zones you served in. You were just one amongst many. But here, you were like a god amongst men. You know it," the Marine said as he took a step towards me, his arms still reached out in a tauntingly open gesture. I stood my ground and I put his head square into my iron sights. "If you keep coming towards me, I'll cut this conversation short. Stay where you are," I demanded, now getting more irritated and just a tiny bit scared. "Do I scare you, Adrian? Are you afraid to look in the mirror because you fear what will stare back? Are you afraid because you see me? Well, you shouldn't be, because this is the face evil sees when it looks upon you while it begs for mercy. This is the face of a warrior, and it belongs to you. Can't you see that? Don't you want to hold on to that? This is the face of someone who follows orders, something you didn't have the balls to do while you were here, trapped in this concrete tomb," the figure said as it walked closer still. "If you can't see that, then I'll make you see, for your own good before you try and forget me. Good Marines follow orders, no matter the cost." And with that, I was done giving him time to comply. I moved my finger off the ring guard, flicked the safety off, and pulled the trigger, only for my trusted rifle to go click. A misfire? I frantically looked down at my weapon while ejecting the mag from it. The mag was filled and perfectly fine. I slammed it home again and charged the rifle, a cartridge flying from the ejection port as a new one fed into the barrel. I pulled the trigger again at the now much closer man. Again, no dice. "What's wrong, Marine? Can't get it up? Not the first time you spared a hostile target," the man taunted as he walked closer, still his arms open at his sides as if he was waiting for me to shoot him. "Fuck!" I threw the rifle away in anger. I drew my sidearm. I said, "Stay back, you fucking freak." I screamed at him again. A loud, asthmatic, robotic cackle bellowed from his mouth. "You disappoint me, Adrian. Here I thought you were one Marine in your whole unit that didn't have a problem maintaining his weapons. Yet here you are. Pathetic," this vile creature said as he kept getting closer. I pointed my weapon towards him again and flicked the safety off and pulled the trigger, but yet again, another click. Another failure to fire. I didn't waste any time ejecting the mag out and to try to clear it. A malfunction this time. I instead just decided to throw the handgun at him in desperation. The Magnum pistol rolled towards him, like an expensive paperweight. And with inhuman speed, coordination, and hand movements, the Marine caught the handgun and brought it to bear, racking the slide. He then pointed it towards me. He was so close at this point, I knew he wouldn't miss. I stared down the barrel of my own gun with fear. "What's wrong, Corporal? Having trouble taking out the trash? Here, let me help you with that." The Marine growled happily. I tried to run, but I couldn't move. I found myself frozen on the spot as a hammer on the pistol cocked. It wasn't fear that held me still. I was more angry than afraid. I was physically frozen. I couldn't move. It was as if proximity of the figure in front of me had an effect on my body. He didn't want me to escape. He wanted me here. He wanted me dead. "Fuck you! Eat shit and die! No matter what you say, you'll never be me. I'm stronger than whatever you are," I screamed out in desperation, hoping that maybe someone would stop him from shooting me. But as my voice echoed off into the hall, no one came. I was alone with myself. "I'm your subconscious, your warrior spirit, and there's nothing stronger than me. I'm the last hope you ever got making it home." His slimly words were the last thing I heard from the Marine, as my vision was occupied with the barrel of my pistol before suddenly everything went black, like someone had cut the light. Felt like I went deaf for a moment, as all sounds around me stopped. I didn't hear a gunshot, nor did I feel as though I had been shot. It just felt like time stopped, and I was freezing in the dark. The sound of my breathing and wind were all I could hear. I didn't hear the alarms anymore, or the sounds of the facility. For that matter, the dream was shattered. I tried blinking my eyes in the dark, and sure enough, my eyes fluttered, and I came to. I found myself in my scout tent, tucked into my sleeping bag on the rolled-out mat. The sound of wind and the cold were just the forest and the world around me. It was never the facility. I wasn't really there. It was just a dream. Yet, despite this, I was still staring down the barrel of my gun, my eyes narrowed in the dim light of the morning sun as it flickered through my tent's walls, and with the silhouette of the barrel of my magnum pistol. Only that guy wasn't holding it. I was holding it. The realization of what was happening, on what I was going to do to myself, came to me rather quickly. I nervously began to shake as hot flashes washed over my body, making me shiver and physically recoil in disgust from what I was about to do. A long breath came from my mouth and fogged the glass of my goggles on my mask. As I started to breathe normally, it felt like I had held my breath since I woke up. It felt as if my very sanity were screaming out, shaking at the barreled cage of my mind and my body, hammering at me to put the weapon away. All it took was a bit of torsion from my finger, and that was it for Adrian Shepard. I took the pistol away from my face and slammed it in the ground with shaking hands. I drew deep breath after deep breath as I tried to calm down. After some time gathering myself slightly, I slipped the magnum snugly back into place in its holster, and when it was home, I released a massive sigh of relief. I was dangerously close to just throwing the weapon across the tent and away from me, but I gathered myself just enough not to do that. It wasn't the gun's fault, it was my fault. No need to throw it and damage it, or something. After all, who would fix it if I broke it? I was counting my lucky stars. I was so close to death. I pulled myself up into a sitting stance as I placed my hands over my face, rubbing my eyes and the sweat off my forehead and eyebrows. I let out a deep sigh as I reached over towards my Alice rucksack, looking for a certain something to ease my mind, something that was very important to me. My mental state at the moment was in shambles. No amount of meditation was going to soothe this beast. But luckily, I knew something that would. I opened the bag and began rummaging around inside, quickly as I tossed things out of my way haphazardly. The thing I knew I needed was a book that would deliver onto me a way to distract and defeat my demons, a leather-bound savior for my most troubled times. There was only one tome of literature that I had in my possession that could do this. As my hand made contact with it, I pulled it out and opened the cover of the book. I quickly flipped to an earmarked section that I always turned to in times of need, for I needed it now more than ever. The words I needed to reflect upon were wiser than me. They were also extremely powerful, more powerful than me, too, as they were able to stand against the test of time, something I knew I would eventually crumble to. I turned to these scriptures when I was in Kiwat. I read through these same passages when I was in Somalia, and I held on to these words in my memory throughout my time with the HECU. And so, I turned to it again, now once more, to do the same thing I did then. I would reflect on myself. Deliver me from my enemies, O my God. Protect me from those who rise up against me. Deliver me from those who work evil, and save me from the bloodthirsty men. For, behold, they lie in wait for my life. Fierce men stir and up strife against me. For no transgressions or sin of mine, O Lord, for no fault of mine, they run and make me ready. Awake, come to meet me, and see you, Lord, God of hosts, are God of Israel. Rouse yourself to punish all the nations. Spare none of those who treacherously plot evil. I would sigh as I read on to the next psalm, and on to the next. As the words kept coming, my eyes kept reading. My mind was slowly pulled back down to earth, as the soothing words of the Holy Bible washed over my fears, and after 3 pages of sacred text, I felt as though I had collected myself and brought inner peace back to my sanity. I quickly spoke the Our Father prayer and gave a quick gesture of the Holy Trinity across my chest before I closed the Bible, and as the tome fell back into my bag, I let out a long breath of relief. My God, what the fuck was that? I whispered to myself. I've had nightmares in the past, but they were nothing like that. Who was that guy? Was that guy really me? I slid both my hands to my knees before I began rubbing them along the fabric of my pant legs beneath my sleeping bag. I was trying to warm myself up, while also trying to still calm down even further to try to make sense of what I saw, and let another sigh as I looked around the dimly lit interior of my tent. So great. On top of that, I'm already foobarred situation. I have to deal with night terrors now. Fantastic. God, the fun just doesn't end around here, does it? I took my hands away from my pants and laid them on top of the sleeping bag as I lazily continued to look around my tent. And what does he mean by he's just the last hope I got of ever making it home? Go fuck yourself. I'm not killing myself just to escape my situation. That's the coward's way out. I reassured myself defiantly. Something told me that the nightmares were going to come back again, and that this was only going to get worse every night. I hoped I was wrong in assuming, but I knew I was right. I wasn't that lucky. My luck ran out when I left Black Mesa. However, on the bright side, nobody saw what I had tried to do to myself, so I guess that was lucky. This was a one-person tent after all, big enough for me, my rifle, and my gear. And, although having a battle buddy, or a female companion to share it with, would be nice, but right now, it wouldn't be, as I also didn't have access to either of those luxuries at the time. As a matter of fact, I didn't have a whole lot of luxuries right now. Period. I had told Rainshine yesterday that I was going to be sleeping outside for the duration of my stay. I said I would only stay as long as I needed. but she insisted that I stay as long as I pleased. She quite respectfully offered me a place to stay at the house they use for foreign dignitaries when they come to visit. She said that it had been recently built and was big enough for me. I'm not sure why she did this. It seemed very forward. Maybe they didn't get visitors that often. I declined, obviously, telling her that she needed that residence for real dignitaries, and that I would be more than comfortable outside in my tent. She then asked me to stay with her at her home, which was sort of awkward at the time, and still awkward now, that she would suggest that to me. She said it was one of the few buildings beside the dignitary's house that had a room to accommodate me. Rainshine further tried to persuade me by saying she would be able to help me right away if I needed any help adjusting to life here. I declined again, saying that the Karen of the town were scared of me, and that they didn't trust me. Having me stay at her home would be a very bad idea. She begrudgingly agreed, and with this, and eventually caved in, and let me deny their luxuries on my own terms, allowing me to stay outside, but with one condition that I needed to abide by. The condition was that her assistant would come to see me every morning, an hour after the sun rose, to check up on me. Though I protested, saying it wasn't necessary, she was quite insistent. I'm not 100% sure why she was being so pushy and trying to ensure my safety. Something tells me Rainshine knows I'm fully capable of taking care of myself. Maybe that's what she's afraid of after all. I did show up here unannounced, bearing weapons. She was more than likely just wants to keep tabs on me to make sure I'm not doing anything I'm not supposed to be doing. Bring me into the dignitary house or her own home would seeing me being spied on every day to make sure I wasn't plotting something. That's pretty good explanation, but I think there's more to that than meets the eye. Maybe I'll understand at some point. My other theory that is less likely to be the case is that she's trying to force interaction between our species to show her subjects that I'm not a monster. I don't know why she's trying to do that, but seeing the fear in those Kieran's eyes as they returned to their homes after I arrived, it showed me that I was going to need to take some time for them to see that I'm just a human, and not a scary monster man. Of course, maybe I was a scary monster man. Maybe my nightmares are true. An hour after the sun had risen, I sat on the large rock outside my tent as I watched the sunrise over the mountains far off in the distance. I based my campsite around this rock, placing my campfire in front of it and my tent behind it. I figured I could use this rock as a chair, seeing how I didn't have one. The morning was cold, but was getting warmer as the sun rose higher. It felt like fall was around the corner, which was nice. I like the fall season for no other reason than Thanksgiving and family get-togethers. While I sat on my rock, I brushed my teeth. I thanked my lucky stars that I had any hygiene equipment to begin with. The equipment that was allowed for operation at Black Mesa had 72-hour provisions, which included a toothbrush and toothpaste. I was fortunate for that, as I did enjoy good teeth scrubbing. The brush was a generic nameless plastic brand, but the toothpaste was Colgate. We were greenlit to bring the travel size tube of toothpaste, and the flavor we were given was Colgate Total Deep Clean, a personal favorite of mine and the other Marines at Fort Santiago. I liked this brand. It had a very minty fresh finish, and it kept my breath smelling good for a while, at least until I ate something, which is why I was brushing now. I had just finished up my small rationed out breakfast. It was from a 24-hour FSR ration, of course. I only ate the oatmeal cookie and drank the Nescafe cafe coffee after brewing it up over a fire. I'd save the rest for later. I needed to make my food last for as long as I could. I didn't want to go around hunting small forest animals just yet. Luckily, we were only packed FSR rations. God bless the quartermasters. I spat a mouthful of foam onto the ground and took a sip of water from my plastic canteen while I scanned the village with my squinted eyes for Rainshine's assistant. It was about time for her to show up. While I was wiping my mouth off with my arm, I saw her. It was the Kieran that I had met yesterday, the one that gave me my formal welcoming to their humble village, the one that went by the name of Autumn Blaze. She trotted out from behind a treehouse and started up the path that led to my campsite. I watched her the whole way here from my rock, noting the things she came with. She wore a pair of glasses that were big, thick-rimmed, and round. On her midsection was a saddlebag, which looked packed to the brim at the moment, with that thumped away against her sides. Behind her left ear was an old feather pen. The quill side was facing towards me, and it gently bounced in the breeze as she got closer. At the speed she was trotting, she would have been here soon. I put my oral care instruments away and grabbed my steel coffee canteen while I crossed my leg over my right one while I awaited her arrival. This was going to be an interesting morning. When Autumn got closer, I saw a bright, genuine smile across her face. It was carefree and filled with enthusiasm. It was paired with a set of wide, eager eyes that looked back at me as she grew nearer. This smile wasn't like the one she had when she was trying to impress Rainshine yesterday. The emotion she held was now actually quite comforting and welcoming to me. Though that might have been what she was going for, I soon heard the sound of her hooves through the gentle breeze and the rustling of tree leaves as she finally arrived at the campsite. The morning sun danced around her, through the tree cover as she came to a stop before me in my clearing. Her smile turned to a full grin as her teeth practically shined in the daylight. I, on the other hand, took a sip from my GI coffee and raised a brow to her. I shifted slightly in my seat. "Good morning. Glad to see you in such high spirits," I greeted her, resting my elbow on my crossed leg while I held my coffee in my arm's hand. She waved a hoof in greeting and put on a massive smile. "Morning to you, too." "Oh, it's good to see you again. Although, I wasn't expecting to see you up so soon." "That's totally fine. Hopefully you slept well, given your current situation and all," she asked, looking past me towards my tent, as her ears flicked a bit. "I'm sure it was unnerving to sleep somewhere you've never slept before, unless you've been living here for longer than we knew. But I don't think so. I don't think that's the case," she said, looking back to me with an excited grin. It seemed she was full of energy that was just trying to get out. "Yep, slept like a baby. Thank you for asking," I said before taking another sip of coffee. She raised her brow, taking her eyes off the tent before looking back at me with a bit of confusion. "You slept like a baby? Huh. Ha, that's funny," she said with a bit of skepticism while still carrying high spirits. I chuckled. "What? What's funny about it? Is it wrong that I don't need a bed to sleep in to sleep well? I'm sure I could sleep anywhere given the time," I said before taking another small sip from my warm drink. Autumn looked worried for a second as she quickly tried to backpedal. "Oh, no. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not what I'm used to, that's all. You no doubt have more experience in that field than I do. She smiled nervously. I grinned at her, my lips on my cup. Of course, I do. Whilst I drank from my cup, she looked me over. She cleared her throat awkwardly before speaking. So this is what a human looks like? Have to admit, and not to sound mean or anything, but I kinda thought you'd look a bit more primitive and hairy around the face area. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but in particularly, sure do look different than the pictures, she said as she looked over at my facial features, scrutinizing my hairline. I lowered my coffee and placed the canteen cup down onto the ground while unfolding my legs. Why? Because we evolved from apes? I said, standing up from my rock while I stretched my legs out. She would nod and take a few steps back as I stood, her shadow now interlocking with mine. She would look at me, up and down, taking in my height as her eyes gazed about my clothes. Well, yeah, our knowledge on humans from equestrian mythos is, super limited. And we only have a few texts that mention your race, and that those blurbs are ancient to say the least. They say you were all really hairy, wore animal skin clothes, and carried around spears to hunt with. I found out this stuff last night with the help of a friend while visiting the library. What's an absolute shame is that we couldn't find anything except those few ancient testimonials. But I'm sorry, please excuse my ignorance on how you were supposed to look. As far as our records are concerned, you're one of a kind. She rolled her hoof around as she spoke. Admittedly, I was impressed by her forwardness. Seeing the other horses react the way they did, I truly thought she would be the same way when given the task of making contact with me. Yet here she is, talking to me as if if there wasn't a care in the world. There was just a bit of apprehensiveness in her voice that I could hear, which only made it sound like she was talking to me at a friend's party, not a completely alien species to her and her kind. Whoa, 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 whoa. Tap the brakes, I said, pulling my hands up in front of me. Why are you telling me all this? Why are you asking how I slept? Shouldn't you be, poking me with a stick or something? Observing me from afar or whatever? I inquired, squinting at her with curiosity. She then mirrored my emotion right back. Poking you with a stick? What do you mean? Why would I do that? She asked, sounding genuinely confused. I gestured to the town behind her. The rest of your kind, your Kirans, seem to think I'm some super evil bad guy or some sort of monster. I mean, you do see the way they reacted to me yesterday, right? They weren't exactly giving me a group hug and welcoming me into their homes. Yet, here you are, asking me how I slept. I rebutted. She looked back to the town and nodded in understanding. The pony sighed as she turned back to me. Her front hoof rubbed the back of her neck, while her smile disappeared into embarrassment. Well, yeah, you're right. They don't exactly think you're the greatest of omens. In fact, I'm sure a lot of them wish you weren't here, but I don't see you like that, and neither does Rainshine. As far as I'm concerned, that's all that matters right now, she admitted, smiling. But why? Why aren't you like the rest of them? What makes you so outgoing to someone like me? I asked again. Well, she sat down in front of my rock and looked up to me. I sat down after her to listen to her explanation. You really haven't done anything that I or she sees as a threat. Yeah, sure, you look dangerous, but looks can be deceiving. You're just confused as to where you are, which is totally understandable. It seems like you were displaced or dumped here, at least according to Rainshine. The reason she says this is because your clothing and your appearance seem too foreign to be of this area, which I agree with. Plus, on top of that, I really don't have a problem with newcomers. I think they're great for our community. They bring in the outside world as its wonders. They bring in stories, knowledge, wisdom, and not to mention inspiration for every pony. She began to trail off towards the end, but quickly snapped back to me once she began to gaze up at the sky. Anyway, all of that is probably why I was chosen by Rainshine to be the Karen Foreign ambassador. As the ambassador, I need to be open-minded towards strangers and not be scared of outsiders, no matter how different they look. I could get behind that answer. I can dig this Karen too. She seemed like she had a good head on her shoulders. I think I might get along with her, but we'll see after all. I don't think she knows what kind of human I really am. Maybe one day she'll understand and run away. Maybe I'll be ostrated, who knows. Or maybe they'll be okay with it. But we just met, so we'll cross that bridge later. Well, I'm to assume you'll be keeping an eye on me, right? That was part of the agreement of me living or visiting here, I said as I stood up from my rock again and shuffled over to my PCV, helmet, and other gear. I slowly began to strap it all up onto my body while I listened to Autumn. Well, yes, for the greater part of each morning and probably afternoon, I'll be here with you. I'll ask you questions and let you ask me questions. And for the most part, make you feel welcome here to our village, she said, as she watched me get suited up. I would nod to this. I see. Well, you're right about one thing. I am displaced, and I'm very displeased about it. I'm not from around here, by any means, and saying I'm a foreigner is a bit of an understatement. You might consider me an alien or an interplanetarian traveler or, whatever. The point is, I'm not from this world. I turned back towards her as my vest was strapped onto my torso, only to watch her write things down with her quill onto a notepad. It was at this point that I found out that the horn on her forehead wasn't just for show. These Kirin must have been descendants or were a different type of unicorn, because the pen and paper that she used to write things down with was floating in the air all by itself. She was using some kind of magic to levitate her instruments. It was very impressive and surprising to watch. It was bizarre to look at for a moment, but I've seen plenty of bizarre things in my time back at Black Mesa and abroad. So, this really wasn't that big of a deal, so I got used to it quickly. Then she stopped and looked up at me, confused by what I meant. Not of this world? What do you mean? She asked, as her golden eyes squinted in confusion. I'm from another planet. This is obvious to me. Possibly even another universe, I think. I'm not the only human here on this planet. I'm, as you said, one of a kind. And if there were other humans out there, I'm sure that none of them are quite like me, I exclaimed, reaching down to grab my LBE.
Yeah, I know how that feels, being one of a kind and all that. The whole Kieran village, not too long ago, was forced into silence to keep ourselves from arguing with each other, which was so boring. And looking back on it, super wrong compared to the other options we could have taken. It was because we got angry and we turned into Nyrics, which ignite into super hot flames and burn things up. To keep that from happening, we all took a pledge into the stream of silence, which kept us quiet. And oh, I rambled a lot. Sorry. What makes you think you're the only human, or only human like yourself? She asked, putting the feather tip down to the paper again. With my LBE up onto my vest and connected to I tapped on my PRC 152 radio with my palm. I spoke into this when I first got here, and I had this thing switched on all last night, listening for voices. It's a handheld radio. It transmits my voice across to certain air frequencies that other radios can pick up and relay. If anyone heard me, they would have responded, and I would have heard their voices come back through here. So far, nobody said anything. Therefore, I believe I'm the only one of my kind, I explained as I reached for my rucksack. Wait, really? That's so cool. How does it work? Like, specifically, I've never heard of a red, red, I, radio, radio before? Is it powered by magic? She asked as she got a bit closer to observe it in greater detail. I laughed gently at her attempts to pronounce it, and my lack of knowledge on how this thing actually functions. Well, you see, they're usually powered by batteries that act as an independent power source. But my radio is special. It taps into the power of my PVC, and it keeps charged for, well, a very long time. But no magic here, just human technology. The Kieran didn't go back to writing this time. She kept staring at it. What else can it do? She asked, tilting her head, clearly invested on what the radio was. That's really it. It can relay transmissions and take them. That's all, I responded, grabbing my mask and helmet once my rucksack was thrown over my back. Oh, well, that's still really cool, but are you sure it's not powered by magic? Does your PC thingy or whatever it was run on magic? Because that sounds like magic to me. I shook my head as I pulled my mask over my face and engaged the speech module after connecting it to the power supply. Yes, the PCV runs on an electrical storage charge. It can be charged at military-issued charging stations or commercial stations, as well as if it takes damage. And those stations aren't powered by magic, just electricity, I said. She recoiled a bit at the change in the sound of my voice. But with this new information, she began writing again. She would glance up at me a couple of times while she wrote, before she stopped again to ask another question. And what's up with the mask and the rest of this stuff you put on yourself? It looks like it weighs a ton and doesn't seem that comfortable or easy to lug around all day. I nodded as I scooped up my rifle from the ground. It's not, and you're right. It is heavy and uncomfortable. Luckily, the PCV helps with weight distribution, and luckily for me, it's not 200 pounds worth of gear. God help me if it was. It's only about maybe, I don't know, 60 to 80 pounds. Still a lot, but this stuff keeps me breathing. She resumed writing away in her little book after I spoke, before she suddenly stopped and pointed with her feather. And what's about that? She pointed towards my rifle. Without a second of hesitation, I blurted out my answer. More than you'll ever know. I half charged the receiver and brass checked it before flicking safety on. I threw the sling over my shoulders and rested my rifle across my chest. I looked down to her to meet Autumn face to face. So, got everything you needed? I asked as she wrote up the last bit in her notebook. She nodded and placed the feather back behind her ear while she adjusted her glasses. Yes, I think that's about everything I needed for a good starting point. Thank you, what was your name again? Sorry, Rainshine only briefly mentioned it when we spoke last night. She said, her ears slightly folding back as a sheepish smile rose to her face. I smiled behind my mask at this. Corporal Adrian Shepard, I responded back. She nodded and smiled back more formally this time, with her cheery attitude. Ah, I see. I promise I'll remember it from this point on. Oh, actually, I do have another question if you don't mind me asking. I gave her a gesture with my hand as if asking her to hand it to me. Sure, go on, I said as I watched her flip to a new page in her notebook. Autumn cleared her throat. How long do you think you'll be staying here? Don't get me wrong, I'd love to have you here, well, as long as you'd like. But Rainshine wants to know a sort of... Oh, what were the words she used? Oh, time frame on when you'll be leaving. I had considered this question would come up, but I never actually gave it any thought. But considering the surroundings outside this village, I didn't want to leave right now. Oh, right away. Not without getting my bearings and stocking up on food, after gaining the trust of these creatures to shop at their stores. Well, funny you mention that. If it is alright with Rainshine, I'd like to stay here for a little while. You know, collect my thoughts and take it easy before I go back out into the desert. You know. Autumn quickly scribbles what I said down on the nut and nods. Oh, of course. I understand that completely. I'm sure Rainshine won't mind at all. With that, she puts her notepad away and closes her saddlebag. She turns to me again, adjusting her glasses as she contently exhales. Right, Corporal Shepard. What do you plan on doing today? She asked, looking up and down, taking in all my equipment. I thought about that for a moment. Usually, I don't have free time to do as I pleased. This was the first time I really had nothing to do. To be honest, I really don't know. I looked off into the far distance, towards the tallest section of the mountains, as the sun rose above them. I gazed at their snow-capped peaks as clouds rolled on by behind them in the great wide blue morning sky. I nodded to myself in confirmation. I think I'll be doing some hiking. Well, that was the end of that chapter, and it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. Although, staying up pretty late doing this is, once again, great. I just keep on fucking saying the same shit, basically. Oh my god. But, yeah. Also, sorry for kind of mixing up the art and all that, because there was a few of them where they were actually meant for certain chapters, especially this one. But, yeah, I'll try to go through and make sure that I got the actual right stuff next time and all that. Yeah. But, that's about it. I guess leave a comment if you would like. I'll read them by tomorrow or after that, depending on if anyone comments. But I'll make sure to read them. And hey, if they're words of inspiration, I'll tag them at the top and like them. Maybe I'll respond to. But enough of this. Stay golden and have a good evening or night.